So thank you everyone for joining my 2021 xLights seminar. I'm going to start with YouTube. So in the interests of my YouTube audience, this is an opportunity to remind people to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to get notified of the latest videos on xLights. As you can see from my YouTube stats, the vast majority of people are not subscribed who watch the YouTube channel. So I encourage you to subscribe, and you'll get the videos that I occasionally put out. They don't come out enormously often, but they do come out with all the updates to xLights. So please take the chance, take the opportunity to subscribe and fix that up for me. Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining the seminar. This seminar will run for roughly 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer, and depending on how many questions there are at the end, a little bit more than that. xLights, for those of you who are new, and it looks like from the survey responses that a lot of people are new, we're an open source project. It was created way back in 2012 by a guy named Matt Brown, who now works for Lightorama and is the primary developer behind their S5 software. And effectively back then, Matt had really just built a show player which was there to try and be a better way of playing his Lightorama shows. xLights then merged with a piece of online software called Nutcracker, which was an effects generator that was written by a guy named Sean Meehan. And Sean led the xLights project and still leads it today. He sits behind the scenes, and he runs the websites and things like that. But xLights, for me at least, came into its own in 2017, when it was converted into the current style where you see the timeline. Before that, if you go back and see any of the really early videos of xLights, it was extremely difficult to use. It was more spreadsheet orientated than today, where it's much more like a video editor, which is much more aligned with the vision that Sean had for the software. And so developers like David Pitts came along and did some of the key conversion work, and then Dan Culp and Gil Jones came along, filled it out and optimized it. And then I came along, and a bit of a Johnny-come-lately lately, and I've been working on it for the last few years, checking in the odd change for about the last 5 years or so. We've been very focused on building out the product's capability and usability along the way. And, I guess I've come to understand most of the product. There are definitely some areas that I get a little bit sketchy on, particularly when it gets to, some of the more esoteric conversions, which, are really not that relevant anymore, because most people are not coming from, the Hinkle-Light sequencer and other pieces of software that are now, fairly long in the tooth. And things like servos and the like, I'm also a bit sketchy on, but and I tend to rely on Gil for things like that. But other than that, I've been across most of the stuff and changed most of the stuff at some point in the last few years. As best I can tell, we are the most popular sequence out there, with by far the most active community. And some of them I would say are more like evangelists who run around promoting the software. At the end of the day, I have no concerns about what sequencer people use. It doesn't really matter, and all comers are welcome. And I know there are still people out there that use xLights to generate effects and then take it back to things like Lightorama and still use it that way. And everyone's welcome from that perspective. We definitely are the most capable sequencer from a scale perspective. We can sequence well over 1 million channels, and many of the largest shows that you will see out there all have xLights sitting behind the scenes. I also like to think we've been the most innovative over the last few years, introducing a large number of new capabilities, methods, and productivity improvements. And we always are encouraging people to provide us with feedback and take advantage of the opportunity to submit bug reports and enhancement ideas, etc. And not everything will get built, but a fair few do, and we encourage the community to participate. We also have an expansive and inclusive offering for the ability to import in many situations and export to other sequences. So, we have the ability for people to bring across their sequences from other sequences and also export to some of the older ones. The newer ones, that's a much more difficult proposition, and we haven't necessarily tried to aggressively support the ability to export to, S5 and Vixen 3, but we can import from them, albeit with limitations. While we don't charge a penny for the software, this is open source software, and you can access all the source code to the software. It's freely available, and we'll go through that. We do, however, feel that there's a bit of an obligation for the users to participate constructively in the community, whether it's joining into this xLights Zoom room. And there will be meetings here throughout the year on a Wednesday night where the US guys run their X Essentials content, and for those of you that haven't seen the X Essentials content, I'd strongly encourage you to take a look at it. But also, there's the official Facebook group, and then there's the Nutcracker 123 forum and the like. So there's plenty of opportunities to participate in the community. Like I said, please help us by reporting bugs, and take the time to report them well. Take a close look at the form and make sure that you're providing us with all the information so that we can reproduce and get bugs quickly squashed. Where you're a vendor who builds off the work that we do, look, we would really like to see those people particularly contribute back to the project to support. And we also graciously accept but don't expect donations from our user base, and there are links on the xLights webpage that you can access to provide donations if you would like to, and you'll find that here. On the xLights homepage, there's a donate button down here for those that would like to do so. As an advanced sequencer, look, xLights is not trivial to use. This is not a piece of software that you're just going to show up to and 10 minutes later you're going to be all up and running and got lights flashing. There's even for relatively simple things, there's a lot of technology that comes into play here, and you are going to need to invest some time to understand how things work. There's lots of people that will help you provide assistance and get you up and going, but at the end of the day you are going to have to develop an understanding. And so today, in 2 or 3 hours, I'm going to take you through the basics of a setup. I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff. This is not going to be an exhaustive walkthrough. We have run in past years a 2-day workshop at the Christmas Expo, where Sean and I have typically run 2 rooms, a beginner's room and a more advanced room, where we've taken you through xLights in a very deep way over a couple of days. And even in that time, we don't touch on everything. xLights is really a very rich piece of software from that perspective. Now, that being said, I know that the Christmas Expo is currently penciled in for July. At this point in time, I've got to say it looks exceptionally unlikely that I'm going to be able to come to the US. It's just not something that my local government is likely to allow. So I don't know whether I will be there this year, but hopefully Sean and someone else will be able to offer that training for those people that want to participate in that. So today, what I was hoping to do was to go through and set xLights up as a first-time user. We'll show you how to set up your show folders. We'll show you how to get all your preferences right. We'll help you build a layout. We'll do a bit of a walkthrough of all your options there. We'll set up a controller or two. We'll create a sequence or so. At the end of the day, sequencing is something that you will then be able to invest a huge amount of time in, or like many people, you may choose to take the path of bringing in sequences from other people, and we'll do a quick run through of how you would do that. Finally, I guess my teaching style is a bit on the fast side, although this intro's been fairly long. I do tend to go things pretty quickly. You will have the opportunity to go back and watch it on YouTube. But before I actually get into xLights itself, I do want to highlight to people that there are actually a huge number of resources out there that are not specifically xLights related that you really want to be drawing upon as you go into this exercise. And the first and possibly best starting point for many people is over on the Oz Christmas lighting site. Now you will need to sign into the site to access this, but they have a 101 lighting manual. And so if you're sitting there and wondering what a controller is and what a dumb string is and what a smart node is and all of that sort of stuff, or how you control your old school AC lights versus these new pixels, etc., all of those answers are in this 101 manual that you can freely download from this site and read through at your heart's content. And I would strongly encourage anyone that's new to the hobby to start with this manual. It is really a great resource. So please do take advantage of that. Obviously, for many people, YouTube is the way to go. And there are several YouTube channels out there. There's probably two reasonably good beginner channels. You can't go past the Canispader channel. This is Canispader Christmas, which is Jeff. He does a great job of walking through a whole bunch of things. He also has a Udemy course that you can go and do, which walks you through in a bit more of a structured introduction to lights, and I would definitely suggest you check out Jeff's channel. He does a great job of introducing many concepts and showing things. Look, he's really real and authentic about things. He's not the sort of guy that just presents you with the perfect solution. He'll walk you through the mistakes he makes and the things he finds out, etc. A great channel. And look, generally an amusing guy to watch. There's another one out there, if I can just quickly find it here. He's got a channel called Learn Christmas Lighting. He also has an academy of sorts. Here's his channel here. David goes through and makes a whole bunch of videos about a whole bunch of things relating to Christmas lighting. He also does a good job. The only thing I'd caution is that his xLights advice tends to be a bit sort of not quite on the money, but he also covers a lot of the setups and construction and a whole bunch of considerations, and his channel's pretty good as well, and I would definitely check that one out. Of course, I can't walk past my channel again and remind you that I do also have a channel out there which has all of the xLights content, including this seminar. It also contains all the release update videos. So as we go through the year, for those that are new to the software gets updated approximately once a week on average throughout the year. And periodically we'll put out a video which will run through all of the changes to xLights. From release to release, those changes aren't necessarily that significant, but accumulated over months, and they really do start to add up. And there's watching those videos gives you a great introduction to some of the new things that are there to potentially make your life easier. So they're your YouTube options. Obviously, if you go back to the xLights website, there is also a videos link here. Now, this is not exhaustive, but it's probably the best collection of Christmas lighting related videos that are available. Not just content that we produce, but content that's produced by all sorts of people. And so I would strongly encourage you to come in here, and you can see that some of David videos are here. There's a few of Jeff's videos that are in here. Some of the VCS content, which is the Virtual Christmas Summit that was run this year when the Christmas Expo was cancelled. There was an online conference held, so a lot of those videos are here. And most significantly, of course, it's the X Essentials videos, which is the weekly presentations that are run that are also available in here. Now, like anything where software changes frequently, the older the video is, the more likely things have changed since the video was produced. And so you should always be conscious of, how long ago was this video produced, and therefore how different might it be today. That's just a challenge that we have. There is also, if you go back to the xLights homepage, there is a manual that is produced for xLights. This is largely maintained by Scott Hansen. It's a massive task to document all of xLights, and the manual definitely has the odd hole here or there, but overall it's actually a really good comprehensive run through of xLights, and Scott does a reasonable job of keeping it up to date as things change. So that's also an opportunity or something you can refer to. From a Facebook perspective, So the official xLights support group is the primary forum in which information about xLights is released, and it's by far the most active and largest community of xLights users that are out there. So I would strongly suggest that you join into that as well. There's also the Nutcracker Forum. So the Nutcracker Forum, nutcracker123.com/forum, is the original forum in which all of the xLight stuff. It's still pretty active, as you can see. There's still a whole bunch of posts. Some people prefer this as a forum to access because it tends to organize things a little bit better. But if you ask questions there, you'll almost certainly get an answer there as well. There are also forums for Falcon Pi Player. So there's a Facebook group for Falcon Pi Player, and there's also the Falcon Christmas forums, which is the official forums in which the Falcon Pi Player is also supported, and all their firmware is made available and things like that. So you probably want to find yourself there as well. For those of you that are trying to take a much more of a do-it-yourself approach to controllers and the like, you can't really go far past doityourselfchristmas.com. That's one of a couple of forums. Did I type it correct? I did. And this is definitely a forum if you're building controllers yourself, or you're trying to use Arduinos and things like that. This is probably the forum. For those of you that have been, relatively new to the hobby, there are groups both around the US and also around the world. And this post, which is one of the pinned posts in the Facebook group, provides a list of all the known regional groups that exist and the areas that they cover and so forth. They will also generally hold a get-together once a year. Obviously the last year and potentially this year are also going to be challenging with the COVID situation, but most of these groups will attempt to get together at least once during the year for a day or two to hold some sort of gathering where people can come along and show each other what they've built, and you can get a chance to get hands-on with some things and get some ideas. We do one locally here in Sydney, in New South Wales, Australia. It's always a great get together with a whole bunch of people and a great opportunity to see things. I used to not actually go out and buy anything until after the Mini, because it was only when the Mini was done that you really had the good idea of what you wanted to do for the current year. That's obviously going to be a bit more challenging this year. Some of the areas meet more frequently. I know in Colorado they get together monthly. I know the guys in Florida get together on a semi-regular basis for things like build parties and the like, where everyone goes to someone's house and they do a project, typically where they all go and build the same thing or something similar. So lots of opportunities to do that, and it's a great opportunity to meet people that live nearby you and see and touch things hands-on, rather than relying on fairly abstract advice that you often get online. So definitely take advantage of those resources. On the hardware side, given that there are so many people that are new to this, obviously making choices around things like controllers and pixels, etc., is very challenging, and you need to work out what you want to do. I would suggest you don't rush into things. Generally speaking, you don't need to get a controller on day one. Take your time and get yourself a controller when you really understand what it is that you're trying to do and what's going to work best for you. Definitely I would suggest that the Falcon and the FPP-based controllers are generally best and most flexible in terms of, they provide significant flexibility in terms of how they can be configured, and they have great scale in terms of the number of pixels that they support and the like, and great flexibility and integration and support within the xLight software. Falcon is probably a little bit easier to use but are more expensive, and obviously are more limited as a show player, whereas the FPP-based controllers tend to be cheaper on a per pixel basis, but and also have all of that player functionality built in, and so having one of those can also make sense. There are others, and look, generally speaking, they'll all work. They will generally drive pixels. I would avoid buying, the generic controllers from the China sites. You definitely want to be buying a pixel controller from a reasonably well-known vendor for two reasons. One, not necessarily because they fundamentally won't work, but you'll definitely get better support from those around you if you choose one of the main controller brands that are out there rather than choosing something that's quite esoteric. I generally don't recommend Wi-Fi controllers. Like anything, there are use cases for them, but running a large show on them is an exercise in frustration, very similar to trying to run a large show using things like Arduinos and the like. While you can make them work, they're not easy to use, and you will inevitably end up at some point looking to spend that money again and buying a proper controller if you continue. For AC control, look, generally speaking, I don't think you can go past the law. There's definitely other options like Renard and Pixel 2 things, but they don't necessarily have that same new user simplicity and robustness as the Lightorama stuff, but they definitely will work. On the Pixel front, there's obviously lots of options for how you can source pixels. We've seen a huge growth in the number of US vendors that are selling pixels for those that are based in the US. There's the eternal 5 volts versus 12 volts debate, which has unfortunately become a bit of a religious battle among those fighting to look the most ignorant. The reality is that both 5 volts and 12 volts have their uses, and if someone cannot explain to you the situations where one makes sense over the other, then quite frankly you're just speaking to a zealot, and zealots are never good for the world. 5 volts is really good for dense props where the power is close. You can run double the number of pixels per power supply. You do need to inject that power into the pixels more often. About every 50 to 75 pixels you need to be ensuring that there is a fresh injection of power into the string. Otherwise, you get a loss of color in those pixels. But when everything's really close together, that's generally speaking not that hard to do, and it will give you a really good efficiency. 12 volts, however, is really great for long runs where power is not so close. They are much more prone to flicker, situations where the pixels at certain points, particularly when they're at maximum brightness, have a tendency to flicker on and off or generate random colors. And this is generally because you're not managing the power and particularly the grounds correctly. And there's a video that I did at VCS which goes through and explains exactly why that happens and some of the opportunities that you have to fix it. Some people do like to standardize on one pixel type, be it 12 volts or 5 volts. And in that case, 12 volts often makes more sense just because, you inevitably are doing those long runs and they're really a pain to do in 5 volts. And so, that's why a lot of people standardize on 12 volts and that's fine. There's definitely been a bit of noise recently about pixels and fires, and I'm not going to steal Bill's thunder. He's got a presentation, I think it's next week, on X Essentials. I did have a conversation with Bill the other day, and at that point at least, they definitely have a smoking gun. They think they know why it's happening, and with but there are still some holes in the story that he had at that point, and hopefully they'll get those resolved before the presentation next week, and you'll get an understanding of exactly what's happening and how to determine if the pixels that you've acquired are potentially at risk from that particular scenario. So I would strongly encourage people to either attend that X Essentials session or watch it on video when it gets released. In terms of strips versus bullets versus square nodes versus all the other types of nodes that are out there, look, as much as strips look great, they're inherently more fragile and more difficult to repair. Friends don't let friends buy strip. While there are lots of people out there will tell you that, I had great success with strip and it never broke and it's wonderful and everything else, there are dozens who have issues with it. So, when in doubt, friends don't let friends buy strip. So don't go that way unless, there are situations where strip will work if you've got an area where the strip is going to be very firmly fixed in place and is not going to be flexing at all, and you don't put too much stress on it due to heat and cold, etc. You can actually do okay with strip, but it is very fragile, and it's a real pain to repair. So be careful with it. And so let me step back from that, I guess, and generalize here, right? There's a lot of advice that will be thrown around, and little of it is actually absolute, and most of it is context free of the constraints or factors that that particular person was trying to optimize for. I can sit here and tell you that, the Falcon 48 is the best controller for this, etc., whatever. But there's a set of factors that would sit behind that statement, and I can give you equal situations where a different type of controller would be a much more suitable controller than that particular controller, and the same is true for pixels and everything else. So make sure that you challenge and understand the assumptions and context that sits behind recommendations, and don't just fall for this is best all the time, because really nothing is best all the time. There are reasons why you would want to do different things.